Well, I think Australia's had a fantastically long trading relationship with Taiwan, and in a period of time in my career, I was the Shadow Minister for Innovation, and in that role I undertook a tour around Taiwan to see what was going on. And I was incredibly impressed by the capacity to innovate and the capacity of the government to work with business to support nascent development into full-fledged, really high-quality commodity that's going around the world. So I think the Taiwanese have proven over and over and over, this incredible technological, innovative capacity. That hasn't ceased. And they are a vital part of the international chain, the global chain, to make sure that people can get these chips that we're relying on to be able to do all the sort of communications that we need to do that are so fundamentally deeply embedded in our business, in our law, and our provision of law and support for people, for defence, etc. All of these things matter, and Taiwan is fundamentally important to that. So I can't see that changing at any time in the future.
新闻硬邦邦，听新闻最爽。我是节目主持人斯坦，欢迎各位收看。Right now I'm here in Brussels at the IPAC summit, and I have an honor to interview Senator Deborah O'Neill from Australia, from the beautiful country of Australia, and a very good neighbor of Taiwan's. Senator, thank you so much for agreeing to take part in this. And what do you think about the outcome of the IPAC summit?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here with you, Stan. And yes, we are good friends in the Asia-Pacific region, two very, very strong democracies with all that entails for the people who live there. The freedoms that we have for a long time taken for granted are not something that can actually just be taken for granted. They're choices that we make every day. And I think being a part of IPAC is indeed an honour to work with other like-minded nations around the world. And today I had the privilege of actually giving the inaugural Kimberley Kitching Award, which is really for courage in standing up for democracy. And the recipient of this inaugural award is Peter Kenaloria Jr., MP from the Solomon Islands, who has a fine family tradition of being a family that led the democratic development of his own country. And I think he very much continues to do that with courage and conviction, because there will always be threats to freedoms for others. There are always challenges to notions of equality and the fundamental dignity of each person. And I fear that what we are seeing in the world, everywhere, dispersed across the world, is a shift from the rule of law and the order that brings to our economy, to our lives, the prosperity and peace that it engenders, with the an amplification of the use of power as a tool of intimidation, power as a tool of getting for one community things that should not be taken from another. And we've got this a growing asymmetry that I think is a massive threat to democracy around the world.
Yeah. And talking about some of the powerful states that think that might is right and they can project power, that they can attack their neighbors, like what's going on in Ukraine. What do you think about the similar situation in the Indo-Pacific region? And what do you think about the current state of China-Australia relationships? Are there any zones of risks between China and Australia?
Well, Australia has had a long-standing economic relationship with China. In fact, it's a celebration at the moment of 50 years of actually doing business with China, and certainly both our economies have benefited from that relationship. The great thing about economy is you can learn from one another if it's a fair and even trading relationship. Sadly, there are very significant differences between our two countries in our orientation towards democracy, and that is why Australia is pursuing a determination to agree with China where we can, but disagree where we must. And there have been a number of very important moments in recent times where Australia has made its view very clear to the PRC that Australia holds a very different view about detention and a different view about what's happening in Hong Kong with the release of Jimmy Lai, something that we've absolutely petitioned for. So this is a very delicate path because our economies are absolutely intertwined. This is a global economy.
Yeah.
We're all caught up in it, and we saw that during COVID, when supply chains collapsed. We're in a post-COVID period of recovering, I think, the sense of our responsibility as nations to the sovereignty and the certainty of supply chains in the interests of our own people. And that doesn't mean we can't look for efficiencies, but we do have, I think, a deeper understanding of the need for resilient nations.
And in terms of economy, do you think that Australia should start doing something to go toward more like diverse sources, diversification of the supply chain?
I think that that's happened everywhere in the world, and certainly there was an awakening during COVID for everyone that we just can't keep doing what we've been doing for a really long time. It becomes easy once a path is laid down to do trade with particular countries, but there's a whole range of countries right across, just in Asia alone, before we look to Europe or to South America or indeed to North America or to Africa, where we can continue to pursue further trade relations to benefit us all in all the ways that trade does. Deeper understanding of one another as fellow humans on the planet, a benefit of trade to both of the nations, benefit to entrepreneurs who are advancing, benefit to our educational sharing. All of these things can continue to occur, and I believe that they are unfolding. But we need to make sure that no longer can any country rely overly on one particular country. And particularly, we need to be mindful with regard to critical minerals, for example, when ownership of so much of the raw materials and then the processed materials for our economic well-being across the world, when there is a coercive dimension to the way in which they are allowed to move around the world, we all need to stick together and say, this is not okay. This is a cost to the rules-based order. This is a cost to the economy of every country in the world. This is a cost to people who want to be able to get their phone and communicate with their family. It affects every generation, affects every business, and affects every country. So I think that there's been an awakening right across the globe that these critical minerals that people had in the back of their mind is just something to do with mining and trucks, and now it's starting to become a real thing that
and
people can see.
And there's the whole process of refining, which is also
critical.
And it's also in hands of one country, one single country. We both know.
And all eggs in one basket. There's an old saying about that.
Yeah. And talking about phones, there is a very important microchip manufacturer also in the Indo-Pacific region, which is Taiwan. And Taiwan has also had very long relationships with Australia. What do you think about the current state of these relations, and where do you see is the future between Australia and Taiwan?
Well, I think Australia's had a fantastically long trading relationship with Taiwan. In a period of time in my career, I was the Shadow Minister for Innovation. And in that role, I undertook a tour around Taiwan to see what was going on. And I was incredibly impressed by the capacity to innovate and the capacity of the government to work with business to support nascent development into full-fledged, really high-quality commodity that's going around the world. So I think the Taiwanese have proven over and over and over, this incredible technological, innovative capacity. That hasn't ceased. And they are a vital part of the international chain, the global chain, to make sure that people can get these chips that we're relying on to be able to do all the sort of communications that we need to do that are so fundamentally deeply embedded in our business, in our law, and our provision of law and support for people, for defence, etc. All of these things matter, and Taiwan is fundamentally important to that. So I can't see that changing at any time in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Senator. And thank you all for watching.